This is the site where our former chief, Coppa Hembo, was actually born. This was dug out as a spring, and this was a kind of a pit, probably in the spring of 1820. Hojipe gave birth to a little baby boy right here that would later become Coppa Hembo. You did not give infants their name at birth. This was developed by their actions and their demeanor as they grew older. Now, Hojipe was not Hilnisanan. She was Washo from the Hungalte band of the Washo. And her mother and family were in Galis Dungal, which is right below us, which we're going to show where they were, which is a winter village. They were refugees. Now, she was married to Winetsino, and they met over here, the stories are, underneath the Gray Eagle Oak. They were collecting acorns. Now, the Hilnisanan gave the Washo this area in here for some winter villages as refugee camps. Now, they were refugees, and part of the reason we know when he was born. See, the stories were such that he was born here in the late winter. And it was after the summers had become cold. And you could pretty much state that's due to the eruption of Mount Krakatoa. It totally wiped out the summers. Northern Europe saw snow in Italy in the middle of the summertime. Well, the same thing was happening here. And more specifically, Chief Namaga, and I'm going to say the first of the Paiute, declared war on the Washo in about 1815, 1818. Now, the Paiute declaring war on the Washo, who had been their trading partners for thousands of years, was because the Paiute wanted horses. The horse so revolutionized the Paiute's standard of living. It boosted them to such a degree they could see the potential. Their neighbors, the Utes, the main part of the tribe, the Paiute being an extension thereof, had shown them the possibilities. But the source of horses was New Mexico, and there was no amount of jackrabbit skins, antelope hides, pine nuts that you could provide to the New Mexicans of value to buy a horse. But what the New Mexicans would buy, what they really wanted, were slaves. Well, Paiute came down on the Washo, on their winter villages in the Carson Valley, and they took them en masse. In about 1815 to 1818, the raids became extreme. And so the Washo looked for places to be able to spend the winters. Their homelands were the Tahoe Basin in the summertime. But with the heavy snows in the winters, and especially due to the fact that even the summers were very cold at this period of time, they needed places to spend the winter out of the snow. And the Hilnisanan here provided them a refugee region in this area. And this is one of their camps, and of the things that happens to be Hojipe's parents' village. When the snow had met her, and he was Hilnisanan. But in marrying her, he followed tribal custom that until the first child was born, you would live with the mother's family, with the wife's family. And so he was here at the time. Now, while the village is down over there, you did not give birth in the village. A lot of people don't realize this, but Dorado County had a tremendous problem with grizzly bears. And it affected these people's lives in a way you cannot really fully fathom. You gave birth to the baby out here. You've got water, place, bring up the California bay leaves as a poultice for her. They gave birth standing up, or squatting, if you will, over, let the gravity help. But in this way, the afterbirth would not be attracting the grizzly bears into your village. A lot of people to try to dig up Indian burial sites, you're not going to find anything because these people, the Washo, the Hilnisanan, the Maidu, they practiced cremation because you couldn't bury the body deep enough that a grizzly bear wouldn't dig it out and drag your deceased relative all over the place. You practiced cremation because of the grizzly bears. And as a point of it, sometime, one of the future things, I will take and give you an episode up at the Gray Eagle Oak. The story has it that Renesano was bringing back a deer to impress his potential in-laws, and a grizzly bear ran him up that oak. Kept him in the oak until Captain Juan and a couple of Hill Nisanon fellows come by, and when it snow was, "You help get this bear out from under the tree, I've been stuck up here all night." And they finally ran the bear off. I'm going to show you Gallus Dongal next, and some of the tools that they had to deal with grizzly bears. They're very adept at the problems facing them in this part of the world. Alright, this is the actual site of the Gallus Dongal that Hajipe and Winesno actually were living in with Hajipe's family. The village is right in there, and there was probably 15 to 20 people in it. And these Washoe winter camps were spread all throughout this serpentine belt to the north and to the south. There were probably 6 camps, but this would vary from year to year, depending on families and who's moving, who passed away, and who's married, and who's got kids, and what's happening. But this is the first spot that the sun touches in the morning, in the wintertime. And it makes sense, it's a nice warm spot. So it's the nice place to be. There are bathed trees, the chinkpin oak. You can also see that while the rest of the forest, going both to the west and to the east, is ponderosa pine, due to the serpentine, you have these gray pine, formerly known as digger pine, because they called these people digger Indians, because the big pine nuts, pine cones, had big pine nuts. And they would be underneath these trees, pulling them apart, getting out those nuts in the wintertime. So you had a lot of winter food here. Plus, the serpentine doesn't promote the growth of large ponderosa pines. You can see pines off to the right and fir, and then off the other side of the hill, pines and fir. But here in this geologic formation, it won't grow. So you have the chinkapin oak, which the deer love for acorns. You have Ceanothus lemoni, Ceanothus integermis, buckbrush, deer feed. So you have a lot of deer wintering in here. So here is another primary reason. It's got a good food supply that's concentrated to these geologic formations. There's always a reason you put your home next to the grocery store. And this is why you've got it. You've got groceries in here, you've got your deer steaks, and you've got your great big pine nuts, you've got a lot of acorns to work with. You've got a creek that at the time was perhaps more seasonal, but due to events on the other side of the world, you might have had a little bit higher water flow at the time, in which case you get a few trout out of the creek. Another thing to this creek is that in the spring, early summertime, there will be clumps, hanging tendrils of what we call daddy long-legged spiders, which is about 4 to 5 species. But there's one that you'll find along these creeks, this elevation and a little further downhill. And this spider figures prominently into their dealing with the grizzly bears. And I will show that to you next, right here.